Hello, it's Thursday the 21st of April, and this is Scotland at 7 with Hugh Stewart. So tonight we have a short programme for you, but there's some interesting stories anyway, but just me, so I won't keep you too long. Now we're going to begin with our update on the war in Ukraine, day 57 of Russia's attack on Ukraine. And today Vladimir Putin has ordered his forces not to storm the last remaining Ukrainian stronghold in the besieged city of Mariupol, after his defence minister admitted that the Russian army was still fighting thousands of Ukrainian troops there. Putin described a plan to storm the Azovstal steelworks as impractical and called instead for the Russian troops to blockade the area so that, as he put it, a fly can't get through. Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk has appealed for a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians and wounded soldiers to be evacuated from Azovstal. Russian missiles and artillery struck 1,001 military targets in Ukraine overnight, including 162 firing positions, country's Minister of Defence claimed. The mayor of Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, has said it's under intense bombardment. Oleg Snegubov, the head of the regional state administration, said Russian forces shelled areas of Kharkiv with multiple systems. He claimed there were about 15 attacks, with 5 civilians injured. Russian forces are advancing towards Kramatorsk, while Putin is likely to want to demonstrate significant successes before the Victory Day celebrations, according to British intelligence. A court in Moscow has fined Google 11 million rubles, that's about £105,000, over what it says is inaccurate data about Russian troop losses and civilian casualties in Ukraine, as well as the distribution of video clips on YouTube produced by Ukrainian groups such as the nationalist Azov Battalion. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen are both expected to meet Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv today. So that presumably happened earlier. Boris Johnson has arrived in India on a diplomatic mission to convince his reluctant counterpart Narendra Modi to back Western action against Russia, along with agreeing to a variety of other strategic, trade and defence partnerships. More on that later. The Chinese President Xi Jinping says his government supports talks to resolve international disputes, but reiterated China's opposition to unilateral sanctions. China has repeatedly criticised Western sanctions, including those against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, but has also been careful not to provide assistance to Moscow that could lead to sanctions also being imposed on Beijing. The so-called Five Eyes allied countries, including UK and US, have warned that evolving intelligence indicates that Russia is poised to launch cyber attacks against rivals supporting Ukraine. Vanda Semyonova Obdyakova, who was a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor, has been killed in the siege of Mariupol. She died sheltering in a freezing basement without water, in the grim echo of how she was hidden in a basement from the Nazis when she was 10 years old. Now let's return to the story of the blockade in Mariupol. Vladimir Putin has ordered his forces not to storm the last remaining stronghold in the besieged city of Mariupol, after his defence minister admitted that the Russian army was still fighting thousands of Ukrainian troops there. The Russian president described a plan to storm the Azovstal steelworks as impractical and called instead for the Russian troops to blockade the area so that a fly can't get through. The declaration came during a meeting at the Kremlin where the Russian Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu presented a report to Putin about the closely watched battle for the Ukrainian port city and claimed that the city had been liberated, in his words, although fighting was ongoing. He said it would take several more days for the Russians to defeat the Ukrainians fighting at the steelworks, which is a sprawling mass of tunnels and workshops spread over 4 square miles in the southeast of the city. The meeting appeared to be orchestrated in order for the Russians to step back from the assault on the steelworks, which has been stymied by fierce Ukrainian resistance and by the difficulties of operating in that industrial area. Leaving the plant in Ukrainian hands, however, robs the Russians of the ability to declare complete victory in Mariupol. The city's capture has strategic and symbolic importance. Russia had decided to blockade the plant because it cannot take it by force, Olosky Orestoyevich, Ukraine's presidential advisor, said. They physically cannot take Azovstal. They have understood this. They have taken huge losses there. Our defenders continue to hold it. Orestoyevich added that the decision can also be explained by the fact that they have moved part of their forces from Mariupol to the north in order to reinforce troops attempting to fulfill their main objective, advancing to the administrative boundaries of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Russian troops have used a number of weapons widely banned across the world, which have killed hundreds of civilians in the Ukrainian region of Kyiv, according to a report in The Guardian. Evidence collected during a visit to Bucha, Hostomel and Borodyanka, where Russian occupiers have been accused of atrocities against residents, showed that Russian troops had used cluster munitions, cluster bombs, and extremely powerful unguided bombs in populated areas. These have destroyed at least 8 civilian buildings. Bellingcat, a non-profit online journalism collective dedicated to war crime investigations, which has reviewed some of the pictures collected by The Guardian, confirmed the presence of tail fins of RBK 500 cluster bombs with PTAB-1M sub-munitions and cluster rockets launched by the BM-30 Smersh. Russia has repeatedly denied targeting civilians and has said that Ukrainian and Western allegations of war crimes are concocted. However, Russia's withdrawal from the areas of the Kyiv region, which it occupied in early April, have revealed signs of cluster munitions on the wreckage of cars, streets, civilian buildings, and dead bodies too. Cluster munitions are banned by most of the world under the 2008 treaty, the Convention on Cluster Munitions. These were unleashed in areas where there were no military personnel and no military infrastructure. Cluster bombs are designed to release dozens of smaller bombs called sub-munitions over a wide area, but the smaller munitions do not always explode, posing a future risk to civilians. The bombs were banned under that international law by that 2008 treaty, which has been signed by 100 countries, but those do not include Russia or Ukraine. According to the New York Times, Ukrainian troops used a cluster munitions rocket in early March in Huskarivka, a village in the east of the country which they were trying to retake. The wrecks of dozens of cars in Bucha and Borodyanka, seen and photographed by The Guardian and reviewed by experts, show the characteristic holes caused by some munitions from cluster bombs used by the Russian military. The use of cluster bombs and cluster munitions has also been widely reported in other areas of Ukraine. On the 4th of April, as a team from Médecins Sans Frontières entered an oncology hospital in Mykolaiv, southwest Ukraine, several explosions took place in close proximity to the staff. Much of this evidence on the use of these types of internationally banned weapons has been collected by Ukrainian prosecutors and will soon be forwarded to the International Criminal Court, that's the ICC, which has launched an investigation into possible war crimes or crimes against humanity in Ukraine. And now to the House of Commons. This afternoon, the House agreed to hold an inquiry to decide if Prime Minister Boris Johnson misled MPs with his Partygate denials. The motion to hold the inquiry was brought forward by Labour, the SNP and 4 other opposition parties, and last night was opposed by the Conservative Party, who today dropped their objections, allowing the proposal to go through without a vote. This means that the Parliamentary Privileges Committee will investigate the PM's conduct, but is not expected to report until after the London Police, the Met, have completed their investigations into several alleged parties involving Number 10 staff and senior politicians. The Privileges Committee will want to decide if the PM Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament when he denied being at parties, which we now know he actually did attend, but the committee will have to decide if this was a contempt of Parliament. 7 MPs sit on the Privileges Committee, which is chaired by Chris Bryant of the Labour Party. He, however, has announced that he will exclude himself from these discussions, as he has been very vocal in attacking the Prime Minister. That leaves Sir Bernard Jenkins, Conservative, to lead the committee, which has 3 other Tories, 1 other Labour member, and Alan Dorrans, who's the SNP member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock. Asked why Number 10 had dropped its attempt to block the inquiry, Prime Minister Johnson, on the plane to India, said that was because he had nothing to hide. It has been suggested that Conservative whips may also have calculated that they may have lost if the inquiry plan had gone to a vote. MPs from both sides of the House raised important issues in this afternoon's debate, but we thought these comments from Liz Saville-Roberts of Plaid Cymru covered the essential threats to democracy if we ignore dishonest and lying behaviour by those in power.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Dr.
Place, it's confused me. Liz Saville-Roberts.
I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that you found me. And just before I start on my main points, there's a couple of things that I've been listening to. And the first that has struck me is that the government, I think for many of us on this side, were really aware of the fact that the government were trying to kick this issue down the road with their abandoned amendment. And it now just begs the question, really, that we're 2 weeks away from the local elections. Were they more desperate to make sure that the names of their MPs were not on the record in the way that they voted, and that was their motivator? And the other thing that strikes me with the government's approach is they live in hope that the public's memory is ruled, that the public's memory be ruled by the news cycle, and that they live in hope that the public interest will move on. I believe the government is fundamentally wrong in this assumption. Everybody who made a personal sacrifice during COVID will remember their loss or their pain or their grief for the rest of their lives. It is engraven on our hearts. We are not going to forget. The government may kick this down the road, but I'm afraid that they are wrong if they assume that they are tied up and that their safety is tied up with the news cycle. The Prime Minister's behaviour will not be forgotten. But today we have a chance to correct the record, to reinstate credibility in our system and hold members opposite, and indeed all of us, to account, not for their or our misdeeds only, but for our preparedness on occasion to defend the indefensible. Today is a chance, therefore, for all members across all benches to do the right thing, and I think our names should be on record when we want to do the right thing. Public trust in our democratic system is plummeting as we careen from one scandal to another. The very reputation of our democracy and of ourselves and the function that we have here, that we're honoured with, seemingly at stake. Madam Deputy Speaker, 73% of the British public are in favour of a bill that would criminalise politicians who would willingly lie to the British public. And that's something that Plaid Cymru has been calling for stronger measures, those which would ban politicians from lying in their public role, not just over the last few months. We've been calling it for the last 15 years. We all know that we live in an age of public disenchantment. From that same poll conducted by Compassion in Politics, we learnt that 47% of people have lost trust in UK politicians over the last 12 months. And if we look back over the momentous events over that period, from the fall of Kabul to the pandemic, to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, what other conclusion can we draw than that we have failed in our duty to seek to uphold the trust of the public? Yeah. This sense of failure isn't just a rhetorical gambit, a professional nicety, an optional extra for us here. From anti-vaxxers to the Putin regime, when we fail to confront mistruths, we create a truth vacuum in which division sets hold. When any truth is as good as any other, division along political lines comes to matter more than agreement on the common ground of facts. This matters. This matters. We work in an institution where we can't call out the lies of another member, regardless of their position of responsibility. Lies which are broadcast around the country, recorded for posterity, and those lies are therefore impressed on the memories of millions of people. And we have no way of addressing this effectively. While I defer to the judgment of the Speaker on this matter, Partygate has demonstrated conclusively that our self-regulating system is really to question, is it fit for purpose? The ministerial code has proven not worthy of the paper on which it was written. Gentlemen's honourable agreements are dependent on honour, on the existence of honour. And we must do better. And if we can't do better because we make a mockery of the public concerns by shrugging our shoulders and accepting that it's merely part and parcel of modern politics, then we must be compelled to do better. We, as legislators, must legislate to uphold our good names. And by extension, not just our good names, but the good name of democracy itself, the very efficacy of democracy itself. And the first step to this would be, and I close here, the first step for this would be a bill. A second would be to rebuild our political model, much as Wales and our cooperation agreement has done so that politics is built around what we share rather than that which divides us. Honesty is the most important currency in politics, and we have to restore it before we here are responsible in part for bankrupting our society.
The question is, as on the order papers, many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
So the ayes have it. That's the arcane Westminster procedure for voting through a bill. And if the ayes shout louder than the noes, then the bills go through. Of course, in modern parliaments like Holyrood, people vote electronically, but that's how they do it down there. Anyway, we thought that quite long speech by Liz Saville-Roberts of Plaid Cymru, we thought that hit on the main points that she's really emphasising that democracy depends on people telling the truth generally. It depends on knowing that your elected leaders aren't lying to you. Now, voters in Orkney and Shetland may remember when in 2015, their own Member of Parliament, Alistair Carmichael, was found out lying about a Nicola Sturgeon fake news story generated by his own department when he was Scottish Secretary. In a case brought against him by 4 constituents, the judges found that the court could not be certain that, what they called his blatant lie about the affair in a Channel 4 interview, meant that he had committed an illegal practice beyond reasonable doubt. The judges said that his constituents were, and this is their words, justifiably shocked and dismayed that he had repeatedly lied about his role before the election. They also felt shocked. They would have felt shock and outrage, but the judges said it could not be proven that Mr Carmichael had broken election law. Although he remained as an MP, he was required to pay £150,000 in court costs. OK, so that was a debate on lying in Parliament. Incidentally, several MPs, including I think Ian Blackford, have actually accused the Prime Minister of lying, and normally that's not allowed in Parliament, of course. So as people have observed, you may be allowed to lie in Parliament, but you're not allowed to accuse somebody of lying. However, the Speaker actually let that through today, apparently because the whole debate was about lying, so you couldn't really do that without using the word. OK, well, another story connected to Partygate. I'm sorry to keep using that word, but that seems to have entered the language now. So police investigating breaches of lockdown restrictions in Downing Street have said that they will not be providing any more updates on new fixed penalty notices until after next month's local elections, which is in 2 weeks today. The investigation is continuing after Boris Johnson this month became the first serving Prime Minister to be found to have committed a criminal act while in office, when he was fined for breaching his own COVID rules. However, Scotland Yard's announcement that it would not be releasing any more updates until after the 5th of May elections potentially spares Johnson further ignominy, were it to be made known that he had received further fines. A Met Police spokesperson said, whilst the investigation will continue during the pre-election period, due to restrictions around communicating before the May local elections, we will not provide any further updates until after the 5th of May. Prime Minister Johnson is facing another 3 potential fines for lockdown breaches, according to senior sources. While the Met's statement indicates the force that will not be proactively announcing any new fines, the media and others may still become aware of developments by other means. The Met said on the 12th of April that its investigation into the allegations of lockdown-breaking parties held by politicians and staff at the centre of government had led to more than 50 fixed penalty notices. As well as Johnson, those include fines. Those issued with fines have included the Chancellor Rishi Sunak and the Prime Minister's wife Carrie. The extent to which Partygate is likely to impact on the local elections remains to be seen, but in a Snap YouGov poll this month, it found that 3/4 of people thought that Johnson had knowingly lied when recounting the events concerned, and 57% felt he should resign. So those results were over the whole of the UK. Ian Blackford said recently that it was, I think, 82% in Scotland felt that the Prime Minister had lied. And now we move on to the story of Jagtar Singh Johal, who is still in jail in India, as Prime Minister Boris Johnson arrived in India on his diplomatic mission to convince his reluctant counterpart Narendra Modi to back Western action against Russia, along with agreeing to a variety of other strategic trade and defence partnerships. India sits in 15th place on the list of UK trading partners, and most of that trade is in India's favour. In the decade before the pandemic, UK trade with India fell by 3%, while others saw a large increase. For example, in the US, the trade with India is up by 79% over those 10 years. Canada trade has increased by 62%, and in France, their trade with India is up by 58%. So remember, it's down by 3% in the UK. Right, the SNP's Member of Parliament, Martin Doherty Hughes, had written to the Prime Minister urging him to use his call for the release of Scottish resident Jagtar Singh Johal. Now, Mr. Dr. Hughes, who's Jagtar's local MP, has called on Boris Johnson to discuss his constituents' case with Prime Minister Narendra Modi to ensure his immediate return home to Scotland. Jagtar was detained under India's anti-terrorism laws following his arrest in November 2017. He's accused of helping to fund a Sikh on Hindu assassination plot, something he strongly denies. Mr. Doherty Hughes hopes that Jagtar's release will be the latest safe return to the UK shores following the release of British Iranian nationals Nazarene Zaghari Ratcliffe and Anusha Shuri. Commenting, the West Dunbartonshire MP said, "The case of Jagtar Singh Johal is callous and cruel. Mr. Johal was incarcerated without trial and is believed to have been tortured whilst in India. This cannot continue. That's why I am urging the Prime Minister to use his trip to India to highlight my constituents' case with Prime Minister Modi so that a swift and proper conclusion can be reached." Also in Westminster today, Glasgow MP Alison Thewlis led a debate in the Westminster Hall calling on the UK government to scrap the two-child cap and rape clause on working tax credits and universal credit. The Glasgow Central MP described a policy which limits the social security claimants can receive based on how many children they have as unspeakably cruel, and demanded that the Tories end their dystopian policies punishing families and forcing the survivors of sexual assault to relive the trauma. Over 1.1 million people are affected by the policy, which the UK is alone in the world in implementing, being the sole country to limit benefits passed to children. Alison Thewlis, SNP Shadow Chancellor, said that due to the cost of living crisis, the Tories must reconsider the policy and introduce further measures to alleviate households' cost concerns. The SNP are also calling for the introduction of a real living wage, a reversal to the Tory universal credit cuts, the turning of the energy support loan into a more generous grant, and a U-turn on the national insurance hikes. Commenting, Alison Thewlis, MP, said, "This is an unspeakably cruel policy that hasn't worked to achieve its dystopian purpose, and it's now only exacerbating the cost of living concerns which families are experiencing, with only over 1 million people affected by this policy. Families shouldn't be punished for having children, nor have limits placed on them by the government over how many they can have. And in no civilised country should survivors of sexual assault be made to relive the trauma to prove that they've been raped to access vital benefits. That is disgusting." Now, over to France. We covered last night, just after we went off the air, in fact, the big television debate began live in France between the two top contenders, the two surviving contenders, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen. Now, hours after that marathon face-off last night between the two presidential contenders, the verdict was that Emmanuel Macron has emerged the winner on substance, although Le Pen held it together on style. The exchange was a rematch of the 2017 TV debate during which the far-right leader became aggressive, but this time Le Pen remained calm, although still floundered occasionally. Le Monde liked M. Macron to a boa constrictor slowly squeezing his rival to death. The Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said it was overall a satisfactory debate. If the presidential campaign itself has been disappointing here, we saw the choice between two kinds of France, two different visions, he told Europe 1. Jordan Bardella, the head of Le Pen's far-right party called National Rally, accused Macron of being the #1 public insult thrower and added, when he insults Marine Le Pen, as do his supporters, he's really insulting the French. Clément Beaune, Europe Minister, accused Le Pen of seeking to organise Frexit by stealth. On this subject, it was clear that Marine Le Pen did not have a project and she's just cut her Frexit into smaller pieces, he said. Gabriel Attal, a government spokesperson, said that Le Pen had changed her style but not her substance. He accused Le Pen of wanting to divide the French, echoing Macron's accusation that her proposed ban on the Islamic headscarf would cause civil war in the city suburbs. About 15.5 million people watched the debate last night, and that's fewer than in 2017 when about 16.5 viewers tuned in. That figure does not include those watching the debate online. The pollsters Elab questioned viewers after the debate and declared that 59% found that Macron was the more convincing, compared with 39% for Le Pen. Among supporters of the radical left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon, whose 7.7 million voters both presidential candidates are chasing, the poll found that 61% of those judged Macron was convincing, against 36% for Le Pen. Macron was deemed to be more dynamic, slightly more sincere, and with a better programme than Le Pen. And Le Monde newspaper concluded the debate was another failure for Le Pen. The vote, of course, is on Sunday. We will be here Sunday afternoon, but the result won't be out until Monday's programme, I guess. Still in Europe, Sweden will speed up its review of security policy, which includes a view on possible NATO membership, with the result to be published in mid-May rather than at the end of that month, according to the Foreign Minister Ann Linde. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has left Sweden and neighbouring Finland, neither of which is a member of NATO, scrambling to react to a more threatening security environment. We have agreed that we will bring forward the publication of the report to May 13th. That's roughly 2 weeks earlier than we said until now, Linde told reporters after meeting leaders of Sweden's other political parties. She continued, if Finland finally makes its decision, that is to join NATO, and everything points in that direction, it will naturally have a big influence on our analysis, she added. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced Sweden and Finland to examine whether their deep-rooted reliance on military neutrality is still the best means of ensuring national security. Sweden's ruling Social Democrats, who have always opposed NATO membership, are rethinking their position, and the all-party security review could confirm that a majority of Parliament backs an application. Earlier this week, Finland's Parliament expressed support for joining some kind of military alliance, and a decision on whether to apply for membership of NATO is expected within weeks. Finland is Sweden's closest military ally. If Helsinki goes ahead with an application to join NATO, that would make it more likely that Stockholm would follow suit. Finland's President Sauli Niinisto has held discussions with a number of NATO countries to ensure a smooth process should the country decide to apply for membership. Linde said that Sweden had also undertaken preparatory work in order to make sure that all avenues are open to Sweden. She declined to give further details. Russia has repeatedly warned of what they call serious consequences if Sweden and Finland join NATO, most recently saying it would respond by deploying nuclear weapons and hypersonic missiles to its Kaliningrad enclave, which is just 500 kilometres from the Swedish capital. And now in Scottish news, plans for future legislation are part of the Scottish Government's official response to the Independent Working Group on Misogyny. The new bill to tackle misogyny is being considered by Scottish ministers as part of these proposals. Chaired by Baroness Baroness Helena Kennedy QC, the group's report recommended a number of new offences to criminalise specific forms of misogynistic conduct, including stirring up hatred against women or public sexual harassment of women. The Scottish Government has accepted the recommendations are pivotal in challenging misogyny and will develop draft legislative provisions for public consultation. The timing of a final bill will be considered as part of the Scottish Government's future legislative programme. Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Veterans Keith Brown said, the independent report rightly recognises the need to address misogyny and makes a compelling case for creating new laws to tackle this unacceptable conduct. The Scottish Government response outlines how we intend to make progress on the blueprint for legislation contained within the report by bringing forward a bill to the Scottish Parliament. Also in Scotland, we hear today that industries such as life sciences, renewables and the space sector will be the focus of a new programme to attract a more skilled workforce to Scotland. As part of a priority action in the National Strategy for Economic Transformation to meet skills gaps so employers can take advantage of business opportunities. Business Minister Ivan McKee has chaired the first meeting of the Industry Advisory Group for our UK talent attraction, meaning rest of the UK. The group will help to inform a programme to recruit and retain workers from the rest of the UK. This also supports a programme for government committed to develop a talent attraction and migration service to bring skilled workers in and to help them make their home in Scotland. Ivan McKee said, Scotland needs to attract more working-age people to meet the needs of key sectors, to raise competitiveness and to ensure the workforce continues to be a positive factor in inward investment. The Industry Advisory Group will explore how best to shape a talent attraction programme which can expand Scotland's talent pool at all levels to give employers the skills pipelines needed to take advantage of opportunities and ultimately to benefit our economy. Okay, so thanks for watching. That's it for tonight. Now, I just have to finally remind you that we are, of course, free to view and intend to remain that way. But as anyone in that kind of free-to-view business finds, the number of people watching is not matched by the number of people who are paying for it. So you are, of course, very welcome to watch, but you're even more welcome to contribute. So if you look online, please go to our website at broadcastingscotland.scot. And there you can find two things. First of all the programmes we have put out are archived there. So if you miss one of the interviews, for example, you should be able to find it on there. It's all on the website. Also, of course, there are several hundred people who have clicked on the donate button and who are contributing a standing order or a direct debit every month. Now, that's what keeps us going. So if you do enjoy watching our programmes, and if, like us, you think that Scotland does need independent programming made here in Scotland, then you'll only continue to get that service if you pay for it, right? So please go on that button. And of course, we know that things are getting very expensive these days, and we know that people are finding it difficult, as I am myself, of course, both at home and here in the studio. Obviously, our bills are going up too, but that's the way it is, I'm afraid. If we don't pay for Broadcasting Scotland, it won't be here for too long. So those of you who are contributing, thank you. And everybody who's watching, it's very good to have you with us. So we'll be back with Scotland at 7 tomorrow. It's Andrew who's doing the programme, and then I'll be back for the full Scottish on Sunday lunchtime. So that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye.